The afternoon sunlight drifted gently through the tall windows of the quiet estate house, laying warm golden patterns across the polished wooden floor. It was the kind of peaceful afternoon that reminded people of slower times, when life moved at a softer pace, and small moments meant everything. In the large living room of the Whitmore estate, a young woman knelt on the floor with patient kindness in her eyes. Her name was Renee Jackson. Renee was in her early 30s, with warm brown skin and kind, thoughtful eyes that always seemed to carry a quiet understanding of the people around her. Her dark hair was neatly pulled back with a white headband, and she wore a simple black maid's uniform with a white apron that had been carefully pressed that morning. Renee had worked in the Whitmore home for nearly 2 years now, and everyone in the house knew she carried herself with quiet dignity. In front of her stood 2 little girls. They were twins. 4-year-old Charlotte Whitmore and Emily Whitmore. Charlotte, the older twin by only a few minutes, stood happily in a soft pink dress with tiny embroidered flowers. Her curly blonde hair was tied with a small pink ribbon, and her bright blue eyes sparkled with excitement. Beside her was Emily. Emily wore a simple black dress and had the same golden curls as her sister, but her little hands rested on the handles of a small silver walker. The metal frame rolled gently across the wooden floor as she tried to take careful steps. Emily had been paralyzed from the waist down since birth. Doctors had told the family that walking would likely never happen. Not in the way other children did. But that had never stopped Emily from trying. And it had never stopped Renee from believing in her. Renee clapped her hands softly with encouragement. "Come on, sweetheart," she said gently, her voice warm and steady. "You're doing so well. Just one more step." Emily's face lit up with determination. Slowly, carefully, she pushed the walker forward. Charlotte clapped her tiny hands excitedly beside her sister. "You can do it, Emmy," she cheered. The room filled with the innocent joy that only children could bring. Across the hallway, unseen by anyone in the room, a camera quietly watched everything. The camera had been installed by Daniel Whitmore, the girl's father. Daniel Whitmore was a billionaire businessman in his early 40s. Tall, composed, and always dressed in sharp tailored suits, he had built a powerful technology company over the past 2 decades. From the outside, Daniel's life looked perfect. But inside, there were wounds that success could never fix. The twins had been born after many years of hoping and waiting. Their mother, Laura Whitmore, had passed away shortly after their birth due to complications. And since that day, Daniel had been raising his daughters alone. His work demanded long hours, and though he loved his daughters deeply, he often felt a quiet guilt about how much time he spent away from home. That was why he installed the cameras. At first, it was simply to check on the house staff, to make sure everything was running smoothly while he was away. But over time, the cameras became something else. They became a small window into the moments he was missing. That afternoon, Daniel was sitting in his office downtown when he opened the camera feed on his laptop. He expected to see the usual quiet activity in the house. What he saw instead made him stop. On the screen, he watched Renee kneeling on the floor with Emily and Charlotte. Emily pushed the walker forward another inch. Her small legs trembled slightly. Renee's voice remained calm and encouraging. "That's it, baby girl, you're stronger than you think." Emily took another small step. Charlotte jumped with excitement. "She did it! She did it!" Renee laughed softly, her eyes shining with pride. "You see that, Miss Emily," she said warmly. "I told you your legs were learning." Daniel leaned back slowly in his chair. The doctors had never spoken with such hope. They had always been gentle, but realistic. And yet, here was his daughter trying again and again. Not with therapists. Not in a hospital. But in the quiet living room of her home. Encouraged by a woman whose job description simply said housekeeper. Daniel kept watching. Over the next hour, he saw something that touched him more deeply than he expected. Renee never rushed Emily. She celebrated every inch of progress. Sometimes they would pause and play little games. Sometimes Charlotte would spin in circles while Emily laughed. Sometimes Renee would sit beside Emily and simply talk to her like any other child. There was no pity in her voice. Only belief. And that belief seemed to give Emily strength. At one point, Emily's arms grew tired and she slumped slightly against the walker. Before she could feel discouraged, Renee gently sat beside her. "You know something?" Renee said softly. Emily looked up. "My grandmother used to say something to me when things were hard." Emily blinked curiously. Renee smiled. she said, slow steps still move you forward. Emily thought about that. Then she gripped the walker again. And tried once more. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. For months, he had been surrounded by specialists, therapists, and medical experts. But none of them had given his daughter something Renee had just given her. Hope. That evening, Daniel returned home earlier than usual. He stepped quietly into the living room. The girls were still there. Charlotte was sitting on the floor with a stack of wooden blocks. Emily stood proudly behind her walker. And Renee sat nearby, watching them with a calm smile. When the girls saw their father, they ran or in Emily's case rolled toward him with excitement. "Daddy!" Charlotte shouted. Daniel lifted both girls into a hug. After a moment, he looked over at Renee. "Miss Jackson," he said gently. Renee stood respectfully. "Yes, sir?" Daniel paused. He wasn't a man who often struggled to find words. But this moment felt different. "I saw the camera footage today," he said. Renee's expression shifted slightly with concern. "Oh. I hope I wasn't doing anything wrong." Daniel shook his head slowly. "No," he said softly. "You were doing something very right." He looked at Emily. Then back at Renee. "The doctors told me Emily might never try walking again after the last therapy failed." Renee's voice remained calm. She just needed someone to believe she could try. Daniel felt a quiet emotion rise in his chest. "You didn't have to do any of this," he said. Renee smiled gently. "When I was little," she said, "my grandmother raised me while my mother worked 2 jobs. She believed that children bloom where kindness is planted." She looked at Emily. "I guess I just kept planting." The room grew quiet for a moment. Daniel looked at the woman who had quietly changed something in his home. Something money could never buy. "Renee," he said slowly, "starting tomorrow, I want you to help design Emily's therapy program with her doctors." Renee blinked in surprise. "Sir? I'm not trained for that." Daniel smiled gently. "Maybe not in medicine," he said. "But you're clearly an expert in something far more important." Renee looked down modestly. Emily tugged her sleeve. "Miss Renee says I'm strong," Emily said proudly. Daniel nodded. "She's right." That night, after the girls went to bed, Daniel sat alone in the quiet house. He thought about everything he had seen on the camera that afternoon. All the small moments he would have missed. He realized something then. Sometimes the greatest acts of kindness happen quietly, when nobody expects to be seen. And sometimes the people who change our lives the most are the ones we almost overlook. From that day forward, the Whitmore home felt warmer. Not because of wealth, but because kindness had quietly taken root inside its walls. And as the years passed, Daniel often remembered that simple lesson Renee had shared. Slow steps still move you forward. And sometimes, the smallest acts of belief can help someone walk farther than anyone ever imagined.